Moscow says that the alleged Ukrainian attack on the fuel depot will harm the scope for talks between Russia and Ukraine, even as negotiations resume. While Kiev has now declined to comment directly on the Russian allegation that its forces struck a fuel depot in Belgorod. A flurry of diplomacy is meanwhile underway in India as leaders land in the Indian capital. This includes the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. So how will all this play out? Welcome to WION World is One. I'm Priyanka Sharma, and today on this special broadcast of the WION VOA broadcast, we'll discuss the role that other players can play in this conflict. So let's get started. Now, experts say that Russia is sending mixed signals as it continues to pound Ukrainian cities while peace talks continue with Kyiv. Ukrainian officials say that the two delegations have discussed the terms of a possible ceasefire along with international security guarantees for Ukraine in exchange for Kyiv pleading for neutrality. Now, VOA's senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports more. Listen in.
Russian military forces are continuing to shell Kharkiv, Kyiv, and other Ukrainian cities, despite a promise made by Moscow to reduce attacks on the capital. Both Russian and Ukrainian delegations cited modest progress from ongoing peace talks in Istanbul, though there has not been a breakthrough. Turkey's foreign minister also hailed progress at the talks. Experts say Turkey desperately wants the 6-week-old Russian invasion of Ukraine to end because the stakes for its economy are high.
It relies on Russian energy for a large portion of its imports. It relies on wheat and other agricultural imports from both countries, and it really suffers from the spike in prices in both energy and commodity markets. And then also tourism is crucial to Turkey's economy, to their foreign currency reserves, replenishing those reserves. And both Russian and Ukrainian tourists are a big part of that and are, unlikely to come or unlikely to spend as much money this year given the circumstances.
Another expert told VOA the fact that Turkey is a member of NATO means these talks took place at a location with more of a home field advantage for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
This is a huge difference from the prior in-person negotiations that were happening in Belarus, which is, of course, one of Russia's closest allies. So I think part of this as well is an indication that the tables are turning a bit and, Russia no longer has the clear upper hand.
Ukrainian negotiators said they laid out concrete proposals, pledging not to join NATO or any other military alliance in exchange for reliable international security guarantees that they would not face another Russian invasion. Earlier this week, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken voiced skepticism about Russia's desire for peace, saying the U.S. is watching what is happening on the ground in Ukraine.
I've not seen anything that suggests that this is moving forward in an effective way because Russia, at least we have not seen signs of real seriousness. But if Ukraine concludes that there is, that's good, and we support that.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has offered to try to facilitate direct talks between Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin, but Putin has rejected direct talks. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Joining us now with analysis is Voice of America's correspondent Jessica Stone. Jessica, welcome to this special broadcast. My first question to you, while Russia is holding these peace talks with Ukraine, there has also been a series of diplomatic visits throughout India and China in particular. What does the U.S. read into these crucial visits?
Well, there really has been a flurry of diplomacy in the region, right? You had that surprise visit by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi over the weekend, followed by a Foreign Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, coming to first China and now India, and then the Indian-American national security official from the United States coming to meet with those in New Delhi. Analysts here in Washington say that New Delhi is really being courted essentially by Russia and the United States to see if it will take a position on this Ukraine war. But of course, India's interests are very different when it comes to Russia. Russia is a large trading partner, a large provider of arms and energy, and Moscow is a much more influential trading partner in some ways than the United States. It also, in New Delhi, is very important, obviously, to have a partner in countering China. And so the United States would like to make the case that it will be a better partner against China than Russia would be, but we'll have to see what New Delhi decides.
Right, absolutely. Now, we're also seeing Beijing take a larger role in diplomacy over Afghanistan's future. The third foreign ministers' meeting of neighboring countries of Afghanistan wrapped up on Thursday in Anhui, China. So what does the U.S. have to say about this meeting in particular?
Well, Washington is a little bit divided on this. Of course, there was a great deal of knowledge here that there would be countries that would try to fill the void left behind by the U.S. and NATO when they withdrew their forces last year. But the reason to stay for some, that's a reason to stay for some, but not to stay for others. And there's really no surprise that there's a fractured approach to Afghanistan's future. You've got India leading a series of meetings, China leading a series of meetings. Sometimes the United States is part of those meetings. And there's really plenty of incentive for Beijing to take on this role. I found it really interesting that Xi Jinping, the president of China, made written remarks to this body. It's clear that they have a great deal of interest in their border security, international terrorism protection, as well as all of those minerals underneath the ground in Afghanistan. And as you know, they already have deals inside of Afghanistan to develop some copper mines. China, interestingly, made a little bit of a dig at the United States, saying, quote, "We have always respected Afghanistan's sovereignty." And it still is calling, though, on the United States to be behind the reconstruction of Afghanistan. So that's interesting as well, because it's unclear how much of that the U.S. and NATO will take on.
Right, Jessica, thanks for those insights. Stay with us on this broadcast. We'll come back to you for some more insights. Let's move on at this point. A free and prosperous Indo-Pacific is more important now than ever. U.S. President Joe Biden said while meeting with his Singaporean counterpart against the backdrop, of course, of a raging conflict in Ukraine, which Biden has now painted as a global struggle between liberal democracy and autocracy. Meanwhile, Singapore's leader said that this is a battle for a rules-based global order. VOA's Anita Powell reports from the White House. Take a look.
The tiny nation of Singapore is more than 8,000 kilometers from Kyiv, but the events there loom large for the Indo-Pacific, said Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong during his first White House visit with Biden on Tuesday. Lee reiterated his nation's strong support of Kyiv because, he said, what happens in Europe reverberates around the world.
The war in the Ukraine has implications for the Asia-Pacific. There are potential flashpoints and contentious issues in our region too, which, if not managed well, could escalate to open conflict. Countries with interests in the region need to pursue all efforts to settle disagreements through peaceful means so that we can avoid reaching a point of no return.
Biden, who spent much of the last week in Europe shoring up those alliances, underscored the importance of global unity against Russian aggression.
Putin's war is an unacceptable to nations in every region of the world, not just Europe, but in every region of the world. It's an attack on the core international principles that underpin peace and security and prosperity everywhere, including in the Indo-Pacific. Today, Singapore and the United States are united in sending the message to all nations, regardless of their size or population. They are equal in their rights on the global stage. They have a right to sovereignty and territorial integrity and to determine their own future, free from violence and intimidation.
Lee is the first leader from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations to visit the White House during the Biden administration. On Monday, he met with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. Analyst Zach Cooper said Singapore, which has just 5 million people but is a major economic force in Southeast Asia, is sure to appreciate this high level of engagement from the world's largest economy.
I think for Singapore, this is an important show that it's going to stand up for the rules of the existing international order. And being able to come to the White House and be rewarded for that is an important signal that the United States appreciates what Singapore's done in the last few weeks. And I think what we're going to hear over the next few months is a real desire from Singapore for the United States to take more of a leadership role economically. And I'm sure they will have passed that along in this White House visit.
And regional experts say this small nation has a lot to offer the U.S.
Last year alone, Singapore was America's 18th largest trade partner in the world and is also a free trade partner. And I think probably a couple of points that'll be really part of the dialogue here is that, when we talk about, even before the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the importance of the Biden administration was really placing on trying to strengthen the resilience of America's global supply chains. Singapore, in a number of key areas like energy and technology, is one of a major trading and distribution hubs for the Indo-Pacific region.
And Biden said this warm friendship will soon expand as the U.S. hopes to host more ASEAN leaders for a summit in coming months. Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
Thank you.
And we still have Voice of America's correspondent Jessica Stone with us from Washington on this broadcast. Jessica, how does the visit advance the White House's Indo-Pacific strategy in particular?
Well, the U.S. and Singapore spoke in unity, really, on the need for a rules-based order throughout the Indo-Pacific, something that is very much a part of the core DNA of the strategy. And certainly this visit by Singapore's Prime Minister to the White House, being the first ASEAN leader from the Indo-Pacific to come to the White House, really is being read as a reward for how closely the two countries are working together. In particular, Singapore has joined the economic sanctions against Russia, and that's a difficult decision to make because Russia has a lot of economic ties and economic influence throughout the region. Right. And Biden publicly thanked him for being the only Indo-Pacific nation to implement those economic sanctions. So public support, deepening U.S. engagement on the military front, on the economic front. Certainly, as Anita Powell's report mentioned, there is a lot to be done from an economic vantage point. And you heard her reference the U.S.-ASEAN summit. That was supposed to take place this same week. It has now been postponed indefinitely. And that's a bit of a blow to the idea that the U.S. and ASEAN nations could get on a more closely aligned page with respect to countering China economically and militarily in the region. Of course, ASEAN not on the same page as some of the countries within it. But Prime Minister Lee also interestingly said this. He gave Washington a warning, and he said, don't be distracted by what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia. Don't lose sight of the longer-term goal of what's going on in our region, and continue to honor the Indo-Pacific strategy when it comes to countering China in the region. So I think that was an effective message. It's certainly gotten lost in some of our coverage in the United States, but one that I think is very important for the region to hear.
Jessica, just some final comments there. The Singapore visit comes at the same time as the Philippines and the U.S. militaries are now doing what is now appearing to be a large-scale joint exercise in the West Philippine Sea. How significant is this?
Well, this is the largest exercise in 7 years by virtue of how many troops are participating. So this is also a signal to China that the United States will remain militarily involved in partnering with local militaries. They have been conducting this all week and will conduct it into next week. You know, Manila has reported 4 close calls between its Coast Guard and Chinese Coast Guard vessels over the last few years. And one of the most recent incidents was on March 2nd when they just reported that one. So the idea here, of course, is that it's key to train together militarily, to keep those freedom of navigation operations going on. And underscoring the importance of that, a top U.S. military official said in an interview with the Associated Press that China has now fully militarized at least 3 of the several man-made islands it has built in the disputed South China Sea. It's arming them with anti-ship, anti-aircraft missile systems, lasers, and jamming equipment, and even fighter jets. U.S. Admiral John Aquilino telling the AP in an interview, quote, over the past 20 years, we've witnessed the largest military buildup since World War II by China. So a very underscoring reason to be continuing to do these types of exercises. Back to you.
Jessica, thanks so much for summing that all up so clearly for our viewers on WION. Thanks for joining us on this special broadcast.